If you've spent any time studying wartime survival, you already know that winter was one of the most unforgiving enemies soldiers faced. But what most people never hear about are the forgotten winter hacks that kept entire units alive when supplies froze, fires gave away positions, and even basic movement became a fight for survival. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because I guarantee you won't want to miss the deeper dives we do into overlooked survival history. For the next minute or so, I want to hook you with something simple. Most of what we think we know about WWII survival is incomplete. Not because the information was classified, but because the soldiers who used these methods thought they were too ordinary to document. Yet these ordinary hacks were the difference between living long enough to see spring or freezing in a snowbank before dawn. The strange part is how effective many of these tricks still are. In fact, if you were dropped into a winter wilderness with nothing but basic gear, the smartest thing you could do is borrow their methods. So let's get into the 7 winter survival hacks that almost vanished from history and why they still matter today. Soldiers relied on body heat stacking in ways rarely mentioned in official manuals. Most people have heard of the general concept of huddling for warmth, but WWII soldiers perfected a disciplined system of rotating body heat when temperatures dropped so low that frostbite could set in after an hour of stillness. Units on the Eastern Front used a 3-man rotation. One man in the middle radiated trapped heat, while the 2 outer men blocked wind and absorbed warmth. Every 30 to 40 minutes, they swapped positions with precision. This wasn't desperation, it was technique. Modern winter campers can apply this by planning shared rest cycles instead of random group huddling. If you're out with limited gear, form a lean-to. Pack bodies tightly with the densest clothing on the outside and rotate. You'll conserve energy far better than trying to warm yourself individually. They made improvised snow furnaces that produced heat without producing smoke. A massive problem during winter warfare was that smoke from small stoves instantly revealed troop positions. So soldiers carved deep holes into snowbanks, added a narrow chimney trench, and used layers of small twigs fed slowly so they smouldered rather than flared. The snow acted as insulation, and the narrow airway forced smoke to cool before escaping, making it nearly invisible. Today, this translates into a low-signature heating method that works when you don't want to broadcast your presence, whether you're hunting, trekking, or stuck in a remote emergency. Dig a waist-deep chamber, carve a fist-wide chimney, and feed tiny, dry pieces of wood. The heat stays. The smoke disappears. They insulated boots with whatever had the right thermal properties, not whatever was meant to be used. Official winter gear rarely arrived on time, so soldiers stuffed their boots with milkweed fibres, shredded parachute silk, hay, cloth scrap, even thin layers of paper. The key wasn't the material, but the trapped air pockets. Air, not fabric, was the real insulator. A modern survivalist can apply the same logic in minutes. If your footwear fails or gets wet, dry the inside as much as possible, then pack it with any dry, fibrous material you can find. Even loosely crumpled paper works because it traps air. This method is so effective that some modern ultralight hikers still recreate it. They used controlled underclothing sweating to prevent frostbite. This one surprises even seasoned historians. Soldiers who marched long distances in freezing weather learned to adjust their clothing not for maximum warmth, but for maximum sweat management. They would purposely open collars or remove a layer early in the march to prevent sweating near the skin. If sweat did start, they'd stop, remove their outer coat briefly to vent steam, and only re-insulate once the moisture had escaped. This prevented hand and foot frostbite because, well, damp fabric is a death sentence in sub-zero conditions. Anyone today trekking in winter can follow this rule. Stay cool enough that you never sweat, then add layers only when you stop moving. It feels counterintuitive, but it works every time. They melted snow for water using body heat and slow warm techniques rather than boiling. Fuel shortages meant boiling snow wasn't always possible. So soldiers placed packed snow in canteens and tucked them inside coats or under armpits, letting body heat melt it slowly. Others placed snow in cloth pouches and hung them near warm stones inside dugouts. This prevented cold shock to the metal containers and saved precious fuel. You can still apply this by packing snow into a bottle and storing it near your core while walking. It's slow, but it guarantees liquid water without wasting energy. They created layered trench shelters that used the earth itself to trap heat. Winter trenches weren't just pits, they were engineered micro-homes. Soldiers dug thigh-deep trenches, roofed them with logs or salvaged boards, and covered the top with a thick layer of snow. Snow is one of the best insulators on Earth, and these shelters could become surprisingly warm. If you ever have to build an emergency winter shelter, borrow this blueprint. Dig below wind level, roof the space, then cover the roof thickly with snow. The result is a stable, insulated structure that holds heat better than many modern tents. They used ration-fat candles as dual heat and light sources when everything else failed. When fuel ran out, soldiers scraped fat from canned meat rations, wrapped a cloth wick and created long-burning micro-candles. These tiny flames could raise the temperature inside a small dugout by several degrees. In a modern context, you can replicate this using cooking fats or waxed paper if stranded. The flame is small, safe when watched, and surprisingly effective for close-quarters heating. These 7 hacks weren't glamorous, but they worked, and they kept men alive in winters that most of us can barely understand today. If you want more deep-cut survival history like this, make sure you subscribe, share the video with fellow history buffs, and help keep this knowledge alive.